3:47 a.m. March 2, 1935. The street tastes like iron. Not metaphor. Actual iron. Blood in the cold air. Blood on wet stone. Blood in the seams of the cobblestones where old horse manure and coal soot have lived so long they've turned into one dark, permanent stain. A girl lies at the edge of Harlem like something the city tried to throw away and failed. Her shoes are gone. One stocking is shredded down to the knee. Her dress is ripped so wide the night can touch her skin. The back of her is a raw map, torn and striped and slick, like someone tried to erase her with the street itself. A pastor's hands hover over her before they dare to land. He's seen beatings. He's buried boys who fell off docks. He's prayed over women who tripped down staircases in buildings owned by men with polite smiles. But this is different. This is a message made with rope and horsepower. He leans close. He hears it. The small sound that proves she's not gone yet. A breath. Thin. Ragged. The kind of breath that feels like a question. Across the avenue, a street lamp flickers. A truck passes without slowing. A man in a cap glances over and keeps walking. Nobody wants to be the one who saw. Nobody wants to be the one who knows. The pastor swallows, and his throat clicks loud in the quiet. He looks at the girl's ankles. Rope burns cut deep, the skin chewed in purple. He looks at her wrists. Same story? He follows the bruising up her arms, across her shoulders, to her skull, where her hair is matted with something darker than rain. He whispers a name like it's a prayer he's afraid to say wrong. Rebecca. He doesn't know her. Not yet. But something in the way her body has been arranged, dumped just so, placed like a warning sign, tells him she belongs to someone. Someone who will come looking. Someone the city should have been afraid to touch. He lifts her. She weighs nothing and too much at the same time. Her head lolls back. Her mouth opens. A sound leaks out that might be pain. Might be a word, might be the last piece of childhood leaving her. He takes one step. Then another. He begins moving toward the lights of Harlem, toward the only place in New York where a black child can be dragged 3 miles and still be considered lucky for being left alive. And somewhere, in a warm room where money changes hands quietly, a man named Bumpy Johnson is about to learn what the world does when it thinks your love is weakness. This isn't just a story about what they did to a 14-year-old girl. It's a story about what happened next. And why, after that night, a grand wizard vanished so completely that even his own shadow couldn't find him. In Harlem, the day starts early, even when it's still dark. Boilers cough in basements. Milk carts rattle down streets. Somewhere a trumpet practices the same aching line over and over until the sound becomes part of the cold. Bumpy Johnson is 30 years old and already older than most men in the neighborhood ever get to be. He carries himself like a question no one wants to answer. People think of him as a criminal, and sure, he is. He runs numbers. He runs protection. He runs the kind of quiet order that keeps certain blocks from burning down in exchange for a cut of everything that moves. But there's another part of him that almost nobody sees. He reads. Not a little. Not, I can sign my name. He reads books with cracked spines and small print. He reads history like it's a confession. He reads poetry because it's the only place where rage can be arranged into something sharp enough to matter. When he's alone, he mouths words slowly, tasting them, letting them sit on his tongue like they belong there. That night before the pastor found Rebecca, Bumpy had been sitting at his kitchen table with a cheap lamp and a thick book, one finger tracking the lines. The apartment smelled like coffee and hair oil. The radiator clanged like it was trying to get his attention. Rebecca was in the bedroom, humming to herself while she unpacked. She'd arrived from South Carolina that morning, cheeks still flushed from the train, eyes wide at everything Harlem promised. She was 14 and still had that dangerous softness young people carry, the belief that the world is mostly reasonable if you try hard enough to be good. She'd been raised on strict rules. Don't talk back. Don't look a white woman in the eyes. Don't run unless you're running for your life. Rules that kept you alive and kept you small. Harlem, to her, was supposed to be the opposite of small. She ran her fingers over a postcard she'd bought at the station. A skyline. Bridges. Lights. A city that looked like it belonged to the future. She held it up like a window. Bumpy watched her from the doorway, a man who had survived long enough to know that every window in New York can become a target. Rebecca. It's all real. You live in it like it's nothing. Bumpy. Ain't nothing. It's just loud. She smiled. A gap between her front teeth that made her look younger than 14. That gap had driven her mother crazy. Bumpy loved it. It made her face honest. Rebecca. You gonna show me the Apollo tomorrow? Bumpy. If you listen. Rebecca. I always listen. He didn't laugh. Not because it wasn't funny. Because he knew what listening meant in this city. Listening meant hearing the things nobody says out loud. Listening meant knowing which streets belonged to who, and which men belonged to what kind of hate. He walked to the window and looked out. Harlem was a patchwork of light and shadow. A place that held black life like a clenched fist. Beyond it, the city changed. Irish neighborhoods. Police-friendly neighborhoods. Neighborhoods with flags and windows and men in bars who talked about order, like it was something they owned. Bumpy. You don't walk alone. Not past Lenox. Not past Fifth. Not anywhere you don't know. Rebecca rolled her eyes with the boldness only a younger sister can afford. Rebecca. I'm not a baby. Bumpy. You're not a man either. That landed. She went quiet for a beat, then turned it into a joke because that's what kids do when they don't want to admit they're scared. Rebecca. So you saying I need a chaperone? Bumpy. I'm saying I need you alive. In the morning, Harlem woke up bright and bitter. Ice crusted the puddles. The wind came down the avenues like it had a job. Rebecca ate breakfast fast, impatient. Everything outside felt like a story she wanted to step into. Bumpy had business. Always business. Men coming in and out. A runner with a paper bag. A woman with a list of names. An older guy with watery eyes who talked too softly. Harlem's economy of survival. Rebecca sat on the edge of a chair, watching. She wasn't supposed to see this side of her brother, but she did anyway. She saw how people looked at him. Not just respect. Something else. A kind of nervous calculation. Like they were measuring how close they could stand without getting burned. When the apartment finally emptied, Bumpy grabbed his coat. Bumpy. I'm gone an hour. You stay here. Rebecca. I just want to go to the store. Get candy. That's all. Bumpy paused. His hand froze on the doorknob. That moment where a man considers whether he's about to make a mistake he'll never be able to fix. Bumpy. Which store? Rebecca. The one on the corner. Bumpy. You don't know the corner. Rebecca. I can see it from the window. Bumpy leaned in. His voice dropped low. Bumpy. You see one corner. You don't see what's around it. She crossed her arms. Stubborn, like their mother. Like all Johnsons were born with a spine made of wire. Rebecca. Harlem is free, right? That's what everybody says. Bumpy didn't answer right away. Outside, a car horn blared, then faded. Bumpy. Harlem is safer. That's all. He stared at her like he could transfer knowledge through his eyes. Like he could make her understand that safety is not a place. It's a set of rules. It's a map you carry in your head. And she didn't have that map yet. He gave in the way older brothers sometimes do. Not because they believe. Because they can't stand being the villain to the one person they still want to be good for. Bumpy. You go. Straight there. Straight back. You turn around if you feel even a little wrong. Even a little. Rebecca. I promise. She kissed his cheek fast, embarrassed by affection, then grabbed her coat and ran out like the whole city was waiting for her. The hallway smelled like cabbage and coal. The front door stuck a little, then gave way. Outside, Harlem opened up. Street vendors setting up. Women wrapped in scarves talking sharp. Kids skipping with shoes too thin for winter. Rebecca walked like someone who had only ever been told to keep her head down. Then, slowly, she raised it. She looked at buildings taller than anything in South Carolina. She looked at signs. At trolleys. At men laughing on corners like they owned the air. She turned left. Then left again. Then stopped to stare at a newspaper headline in a box on the sidewalk. Her breath fogged the glass. A story about a union strike. A story about the mayor. A story about some man's scandal. She read the words slowly, sounding them out in her mind. Proud of herself. Proud of Harlem. Proud that in this place, nobody slapped her for learning. She walked on. And then she took the wrong turn. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a sudden leap into darkness. It was one street that looked like another street. One corner that wasn't marked with danger. One block where the faces changed from brown to pale, where the voices shifted, where the air felt different. A bank sign sat like a monument. The kind of building that looked clean even when the city was dirty. The neighborhood around it was Irish. Police-friendly. The kind of place where a black girl walking alone wasn't invisible. She was an announcement. Rebecca felt it in her body before she understood it. The warmth of Harlem behind her. The cold attention ahead. She slowed. She looked back. Harlem was only a few blocks away. She could still see the edge of it, like a shoreline. She could still turn around. Then she heard a laugh. Not friendly. Not accidental. A laugh with purpose. A group of men stood near a horse-drawn cart, their coats heavy, their hats low. One of them held the reins. The horse stamped, impatient, breath steaming. Another man had a cigarette clamped in his mouth like a challenge. They didn't whistle. They didn't catcall like regular street fools. They watched her like hunters watch a deer that wandered into the wrong clearing. Rebecca kept walking, trying to look like she belonged. Her heart started to beat louder. The sound of it filled her ears. A man stepped into her path. Man, where you going, girl? Rebecca tried to step around him. Another man shifted. Blocked her. Then another. Then another. 12. She counted without meaning to. 12 shapes making a circle. 12 pairs of eyes. 12 mouths that looked like they practiced smiling without kindness. Her hands went numb inside her coat pockets. Her mouth went dry. Rebecca. I'm going to the store. A man snorted. Man, this ain't your store. Another voice, deeper, amused. Voice. You lost. Rebecca lifted her chin. She heard Bumpy's voice in her head. Straight there. Straight back. Turn around if you feel even a little wrong. It was too late to turn around now. The circle had closed. A man stepped closer. His breath smelled like whiskey and onions. Man, you know what you do when white men talk to you. Rebecca stared at him. She didn't answer. Man, you bow. The word hung in the air like a command from another century. Rebecca's stomach turned. Her eyes flashed with something that surprised even her. Defiance. The kind of defiance she'd been taught to swallow. Rebecca. No. The men laughed. Not because it was funny. Because they didn't expect the word to exist in her mouth. Voice. What you say? Rebecca. I said no. She felt her pulse in her throat. She felt the street under her feet, the uneven stone, the cold seeping through her soles. One of the men reached out and grabbed her wrist. His fingers were thick. Hard. He squeezed like he wanted to leave a signature. Rebecca jerked back. Rebecca. Let go of me. A slap cracked across her face. Clean. Efficient. Like it had been done before. Her head snapped to the side. Her cheek burned. Her eyes watered. She tasted blood. That iron again. Man, you gonna learn? Fear rose in her like heat. Not just fear for her body. Fear of what it meant. Fear of being taken. Fear of disappearing into a building and never being seen again. She did the only thing she could think of. The only weapon she had. Rebecca. My brother's name is Bumpy Johnson. The circle paused for half a second. Then the men laughed harder. Man. Who? Rebecca. Bumpy Johnson. You touched me, Hill. Another slap. Then a fist. Her vision flashed white. She stumbled. Her knees hit stone. Voice. Ain't nobody scared of no. Bumpy. The way the voice said it. Like the name was a joke. Like it was a child's nickname. Like it meant nothing. Rebecca tried to stand. A boot pushed her shoulder. Put her back down. She looked up and saw one of them holding rope. Coiled like a snake. Dirty rope. The kind used for crates. For animals. For pulling things that don't get to say no. Rebecca's breath came fast. She tried to crawl backward. Hands slipping on stone. Fingertips scraping. Nails breaking. The rope came around her ankles. Tight. Too tight. The fibers bit into her skin. She screamed then. A raw sound that tore out of her chest and bounced off brick walls and vanished into the city's indifference. A man dragged her feet toward the horse. Rebecca. Please! Please! The word tasted like surrender. She hated herself for saying it. But her body wanted to live. Voice. You should have bowed. Someone tied the rope to the saddle. Someone patted the horse's neck. The animal shifted, confused by the noise, by the scent of fear. Rebecca twisted, tried to untie the knot. Hands shaking. Fingers slick with blood. She couldn't get purchase. The rope laughed at her. She looked for help. Windows. Doors. Anyone. A curtain moved. Then fell back into place. The horse lurched forward. The first pull yanked her so hard her shoulders hit the stone. Her head bounced. Her teeth clacked together. Pain exploded along her spine. Then the horse started to trot. Rebecca's body became a thing. A thing dragged. A thing bouncing. A thing scraping along cobblestone. Her dress shredded. Her skin tore. Her back opened up. The street took what it wanted. The sound was the worst part. Stone on flesh. A wet, grinding rasp. Her own screams breaking into smaller sounds, like the air was being knocked out of her with every bounce. The men walked behind, laughing, shouting, making sure she stayed in the center of the road so everyone could see. So everyone could learn. 3 miles. It doesn't sound like much until you measure it in seconds of agony. Until you count every cobblestone. Until you realize a mile is an eternity when your body is being sanded down to bone. At some point, her voice gave out. The screams became gasps. The gasps became silence. The only sound left was the horse's hooves and the rope snapping tight with every jolt. Somewhere in that distance, she stopped being a girl on her first day in Harlem and became something else. A symbol. A warning. A piece of hate delivered by hand. When they reached the edge of Harlem, the men slowed. They didn't want to bring the horse too far. They didn't want to risk crossing into a place where eyes had teeth. They cut the rope. Her body rolled, limp, leaving a smear on the stone. Voice. Tell your people. Then they turned the horse around and disappeared back into their territory, laughing like they'd done something righteous. Rebecca lay there breathing in tiny pieces. The street lamp above her buzzed. The city kept moving. And the pastor found her before the cold could finish what the rope started. He carried her into Harlem like he was carrying a secret too heavy for one man. People saw and stepped back. Someone ran for a car. Someone shouted for an address. Within minutes, Rebecca was on a cot in a back room that smelled like whiskey and disinfectant and fear. An underground doctor. The kind who didn't ask questions. The kind who worked fast and quiet. Bumpy arrived like a storm. He pushed through bodies. Through hands trying to stop him. Through whispers. His eyes locked on the cot, on the shape of his sister, and something in him broke so cleanly it almost sounded like glass. He didn't speak at first. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. The doctor looked up. Doctor. She's alive. That's what I can give you right now. Bumpy stepped closer. He saw Rebecca's face swollen, one eye nearly shut. He saw her hair cut away in patches where blood had glued it down. He saw her chest rise and fall unevenly, like each breath was a negotiation. He reached for her hand. His fingers touched hers. Her skin was cold. He looked at her back and his vision narrowed. The injuries weren't just wounds. They were writing. They spelled out the city's opinion of black innocence. Broken ribs. The doctor counted them under his breath. A fractured skull. Skin torn across her back, the flesh raw and jagged. Infection waiting like a patient predator. Bumpy didn't cry. He didn't rage. Not yet. He sat. He stayed. Hour after hour. Night after night. He didn't leave the bedside. Not for food. Not for sleep. Not for business. Men came to the door with messages. He didn't read them. Someone offered coffee. He didn't drink it. He watched Rebecca breathe like he could keep her alive by staring hard enough. 4 days. In that time, Harlem whispered. Word moved fast in a neighborhood built on information. A girl dragged behind a horse. A girl dumped at the border. People told the story with shaking hands. Mothers pulled children closer. Men sharpened knives they didn't plan to use. Everyone waited for the thing they knew was coming. Bumpy Johnson was not a man you harmed and then expected the world to remain normal. On the 5th day, at 6:12 a.m., Rebecca's eyelids fluttered. Bumpy leaned in so fast his chair scraped the floor. Her lips moved. Dry. Cracked. A sound escaped that was barely there. Bumpy. Rebecca. You here. You here with me. Her gaze tried to focus. Her good eye found his face. Recognition flickered. Rebecca's throat worked. She swallowed pain. Rebecca. They wore white hoods. The room went still. Even the doctor stopped moving. Rebecca. Leader had gold cross. Bumpy's jaw tightened. His hand gripped hers harder. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to anchor himself. Rebecca blinked slow. Rebecca. He laughed. Like he was singing. A distinctive laugh. A voice. Phrases. Little pieces of a man that could be traced if you knew how to listen. Rebecca's mouth trembled. Rebecca. He said. Order. He said. God sees. She closed her eye. Tears leaked out anyway, sliding down into her hair. Bumpy leaned back. He stared at the wall, not seeing it. His mind moved like a machine, turning detail into direction. White hoods. Gold cross. A leader. Not just random drunks. Not just neighborhood thugs. Organization. Ritual. A hierarchy. That meant one thing. A grand wizard. The Klan had been creeping through New York in those years like mold. Not always burning crosses. Sometimes wearing suits. Sitting on councils. Owning businesses. Hiding in plain sight, using respectable faces to shield rotten hearts. Bumpy stood up slowly. His chair tipped back and hit the floor with a hard thud. The sound made the doctor flinch. Bumpy walked to the sink. He turned on the water. He washed his hands. Not because they were dirty. Because he needed something to do with the energy roaring inside him. The water ran clear. His hands didn't. He turned it off. He dried them carefully. Every motion controlled. The doctor watched him and understood. Not just what he planned. How he planned to do it. Doctor. Bumpy, don't bring war in here. Bumpy didn't look at him. Bumpy. They brought it. He stepped back to Rebecca. He bent down. His voice softened, and that softness was more terrifying than shouting. Bumpy. You did good telling me. You did good surviving. Rebecca's fingers twitched around his. Rebecca. I didn't bow. He held her gaze. Bumpy. No. You didn't. And in that moment, the last line between his criminal life and his human life disappeared. Not blurred. Disappeared. Like it had never existed. He kissed her forehead, careful not to touch bruises. Then he turned and walked out. In Harlem, Bumpy's intelligence network wasn't a myth. It was a living thing. Barbers who heard talk. Doormen who watched faces. Numbers runners who could cross neighborhoods without being questioned. Women who served coffee in offices where men spoke too freely. Kids who delivered packages and noticed which cars stayed parked too long. By noon, Bumpy had a list of questions and a list of people assigned to answer them. He didn't need a name yet. He needed the shape of the enemy. Who rides with a horse in Irish territory? Who meets at night? Who buys robes? Who orders crosses made of gold? Harlem had its own ways of gathering truth. Not through official channels. Through pressure. Through favors. Through fear. Through the kind of persuasion that leaves no paper trail. 2 days later. March 4, 1935. 9:20 p.m. A man came to Bumpy's apartment with a small notebook and a tremor in his hands. He was a tailor. Legitimate on the surface. Underneath, he repaired costumes for anyone who paid. Theaters. Fraternal lodges. Men who like ceremonies. Tailor. They been ordering hoods. White. Thick cotton. High-pointed. Like ghosts. Bumpy sat at the table. Lamp on. Book closed. Bumpy. Where? Tailor swallowed. Tailor. A warehouse near the river. They pick up in crates. Bumpy nodded once. Another man arrived later. A city clerk. The kind who moved papers, not guns. Clerk. There's a construction company. McDonough Construction. They got city contracts. They got friends. They got police. Bumpy's eyes narrowed. Bumpy. McDonough. Clerk. James McDonough. Councilman. Family man. Church deacon. Real clean name. Clean name. Dirty hands. Bumpy didn't react outwardly. But inside, something clicked into place. A respected businessman. A politician. A man who could walk into a church on Sunday and be called, "Sir," then put on a hood at night and drag a child behind a horse. That kind of double life wasn't uncommon. It was the American way, polished. Bumpy stood and walked to the window. He looked out at Harlem. The neighborhood that survived by building its own justice because the city's justice didn't apply equally. Rebecca's first words echoed in him. Gold cross. Order. God sees. He turned back. Bumpy. I want his routine. Clerk. That's hard. Bumpy. Then get easier. He set his people on it. Step by step. Day by day. They learned McDonough's mornings started early. 7 a.m., breakfast with his wife. Coffee black. 2 eggs. No toast. He read the paper front to back. Every Saturday, he took his daughter to a cafe and taught her chess at the same corner table, same order for her, hot chocolate with whipped cream. He kissed her forehead like he meant it. Then he went to City Hall and shook hands with black constituents who had to pretend they didn't know what he did at night. At 5:30 p.m., he attended church meetings. He spoke about morality. He spoke about decency. He spoke about the decline of the nation like he was a man grieving, not a man causing it. And every Thursday, he stayed late at his office. Alone. Until midnight. No secretary. No assistants. Just him, papers, and the illusion of safety that comes from believing the world is built to protect you. Bumpy listened to every report without blinking. He kept a small list in his pocket. He added details. Times. Places. Habits. Then he did something that would have looked impossible to anyone who didn't understand Harlem's desperation. He planted a man inside the Klan. A light-skinned black man named Lewis. Harlem-born. Sharp eyes. Quiet voice. A man who had learned young how to change his posture, his vocabulary, the set of his shoulders. In certain neighborhoods he could pass as white if he kept his hat low and his words careful. It was dangerous in a way that didn't need explaining. Bumpy met Lewis in a back room of a jazz club where the music upstairs was so loud it shook dust from the ceiling. Bumpy. You do this, you don't get caught. If you get caught, there's nothing I can do. Louis nodded. He didn't smile. Louis, I know what they did to that girl. Bumpy slid a photograph across the table. Not Rebecca's face. Her back. The wounds. The truth. Louis looked once. His jaw tightened. He pushed the photo back like it burned. Louis, I'll find your man. Bumpy, find all of them. Louis went into Irish territory and started drinking in the right bars. Saying the right things. Laughing at the right jokes. Talking about order with practiced ease. It took weeks. The Klan wasn't just hoods. It was invitations. Vetting. Trust built on shared hate. By March 21st, Louis had done it. He came back to Bumpy with a piece of paper folded small. Louis, they got a rally coming. Big one. 200. Maybe more. Bumpy didn't take the paper right away. He studied Louis's face. The sweat at his hairline. The tension in his neck. That look a man gets when he's been sitting too close to a fire. Bumpy. When? Louis. Next Thursday night. Same night McDonough stayed late in his office. Bumpy took the paper now. He opened it. He read the address of the rally site. An old hall. Private. Guarded. Louis continued. Louis, they've been talking. They think Harlem's getting bold. They want to make an example. They say the city's theirs if they want it. Bumpy's fingers folded the paper back up carefully. Bumpy, they already made their example. Louis swallowed. Louis, McDonough leads it. They call him Grand Wizard. Bumpy looked down at his hands. He flexed them once. Slowly. Bumpy. Good. That word hit the room like a gunshot. Because Bumpy wasn't planning a quick death. He wasn't planning something that would satisfy his rage in private. He was planning an answer in the language the Klan understood. Symbol. Spectacle. Fear. He kept repeating numbers in his head. Like a prayer. Like a ledger. 3 miles. 12 men watched. 36 payments. But he was merciful. Only 12 pieces? 1 for each coward. That became his mantra. It stabilized him. Turned chaos into arithmetic. Turned grief into a plan. 5 targets. 7 days. 0 mercy. Not the targets you think. Not random Klansmen. Not the whole organization. He wanted something cleaner. Something surgical. He wanted the head. And he wanted everyone who held the rope to receive a piece of that head's consequence. In the days before Thursday, Harlem watched Bumpy move differently. He still walked the streets. Still did business. Still shook hands. Still talked with that calm, measured voice that made men lean in. But his eyes were somewhere else. Behind the present. In the coming night. He visited Rebecca every day. She was healing slowly. Her back bandaged. Her movements stiff. Her face still bruised in a way that made her look like a stranger. But her eye was awake now. Sharp. Watching him. On March 26, 1935, at 2:15 p.m., she reached out and stopped his hand as he adjusted her pillow. Rebecca. You gonna do something? It wasn't a question. It was an observation. Bumpy held her gaze. Bumpy. I'm gonna make sure you're safe. Rebecca's lips tightened. She looked away, then back. Rebecca. No one's safe. Bumpy didn't argue. He couldn't. Rebecca's voice dropped, fragile but firm. Rebecca. Don't make me the reason you disappear too. Bumpy leaned closer, and his voice came out like steel wrapped in velvet. Bumpy. I'm not disappearing. Rebecca swallowed. Pain flickered in her face. Rebecca. They said God sees. Bumpy's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Bumpy. Then God's about to get an education. Thursday arrived. March 28, 1935. The air was warmer by a degree, just enough to make the streets slick with thaw and promise. At 8:40 p.m., McDonough was at the rally site for a short appearance. Lewis had learned that too. The Grand Wizard liked to be seen early, to be applauded, to feel his power. Then he left the underlings to chant and drink while he returned to his office for work. At 9:30 p.m., he drove back to his building downtown. At 9:58 p.m., he entered his office. 4th floor. Corner room. One window facing the street, one facing the alley. Files stacked neat. A whiskey bottle in the bottom drawer. A small pistol in the top. At 10:13 p.m., he loosened his tie. He sat. He opened a folder. He became Councilman McDonough again. The respectable face. The clean hands. At 10:31 p.m., the door clicked. Not opening. Locking. From the outside. McDonough's head snapped up. His chair scraped back. His hand went to the desk drawer. He yanked it open. The pistol wasn't there. His breath caught. He stood fast, crossing to the door. He rattled the knob. It didn't move. He slammed his shoulder into it once. Twice. The door held. His pulse began to rise in his throat. He tried to shout, but pride stopped him. Pride and the knowledge that the building was mostly empty at this hour. He turned toward the windows. The alley window was open a crack. A silhouette moved. Then Bumpy Johnson stepped through like he belonged there. No mask. No hood. No disguise. Just a man in a dark coat, hat low, eyes steady. A man who had climbed the fire escape like a ghost with purpose. McDonough stumbled back. McDonough, who the hell are you? Bumpy didn't answer. He took 2 steps forward. McDonough's hand grabbed for a letter opener on the desk. Bumpy moved faster. He caught McDonough's wrist and twisted. A sharp crack. Bones shifting wrong. McDonough screamed. The sound filled the office and died against the walls. Bumpy held him close, not tender, not cruel. Controlled. Bumpy. You like lessons, Councilman? McDonough panted, eyes wild. McDonough. You're making a mistake. Bumpy's other hand reached into his coat. He pulled out a photograph. Rebecca's back. He held it up. McDonough's face changed. Not guilt. Recognition. A flicker of pride. Then fear. Bumpy. You did this. McDonough swallowed hard. His good hand clenched into a fist. McDonough. That girl shouldn't have been there. Bumpy stared at him. The calm in his eyes was not mercy. It was commitment. Bumpy. Now we do math. McDonough blinked, confused, desperate. Bumpy leaned closer. Bumpy. 3 miles you dragged her. McDonough's breath hitched. Bumpy. 12 men watched. McDonough tried to pull away. Bumpy tightened his grip. McDonough winced. Bumpy. That's 36 payments. McDonough's eyes darted to the window. To the alley? Like he could jump. Like he could fly. Bumpy's voice dropped. Bumpy. But I'm merciful. Only 12 pieces? 1 for each coward. McDonough's mouth opened. A sound came out that wasn't words. Pure animal. Bumpy stepped back and pulled something from his pocket. A set of keys. McDonough stared at the keys, not understanding. Bumpy. You're gonna come with me. McDonough. No. Bumpy moved behind him. A cloth came up. Smelled like chloroform. Like surrender. Like the end of choices. McDonough fought for 3 seconds. 4. 5. Then his body went heavy. Bumpy caught him before he hit the floor. He lowered him carefully, almost respectfully. Not because he deserved respect. Because this wasn't rage. This was procedure. Downstairs, a car waited. 2 men inside. Faces hard. Quiet. Harlem men. Loyal. Paid. But even they looked uneasy. Because this job wasn't like other jobs. They lifted McDonough into the backseat like a drunk friend and drove through streets that didn't know they were watching history being rewritten. They took him to a warehouse on the river. It belonged to Bumpy, on paper to someone else. A place used for storage. For money. For secrets. Inside, The air was cold and smelled like dust and old wood. A single light hung from the ceiling, making a pool of yellow on the floor. A table stood beneath it. Tools laid out in a neat line. Not butcher knives. Not sloppy blades. Surgical precision. A saw. Hooks. Clean cloth. A bucket. A man's idea of anatomy made real. Bumpy stood over the unconscious councilman and waited for him to wake up. At 11:54 p.m., McDonough's eyes fluttered open. He tried to sit up. Rope held him. His wrists bound. His ankles bound. His broken wrist throbbing in time with his heartbeat. He looked around. Fear flooded his face like a tide. McDonough, you can't do this! Bumpy stepped into the light. The shadow of his hat cut his face in half. Bumpy, you already did. McDonough's voice cracked. McDonough, I'm a councilman. You touch me, they'll come. Bumpy's eyes didn't move. Bumpy, they didn't come for her. McDonough's breathing sped up. His chest rose and felt like it wanted to tear out of his body. McDonough, I have a family. Bumpy's voice stayed low. Bumpy, so did she. A moment. Silence thick enough to choke on. McDonough tried another angle. Always bargaining. Men like him always believed there was a door out if they talked right. McDonough. Money. Whatever you want. I can. Bumpy. You can't buy back 3 miles. McDonough shook his head, frantic. McDonough. This is barbaric. Bumpy's mouth tightened. Bumpy. Dragging a child behind a horse is barbaric. I'm just educational. He stepped closer, and for the first time his voice carried something like emotion. Not rage. Not grief. Something colder. Bumpy. You told her to bow. McDonough swallowed. Bumpy. Did she? McDonough stared at him. His eyes flickered. A lie started to form. Then he remembered where he was. McDonough. No. Bumpy nodded once. Like he'd expected that. Bumpy. Good. The next part was not shown to the world. It wasn't a story anyone told in detail. Harlem didn't need the gore. Harlem needed the result. What mattered was what happened at the rally. Midnight. March 29, 1935. The Klan Hall was loud with chanting and cheap whiskey and the kind of confidence that comes from believing the law is your friend. 200 men. Maybe more. White hoods in a private room. White hands raised. White mouths shouting prayers that sounded like threats. They expected their grand wizard to return. They expected him to stand on the stage and speak about order, about purity, about the city being theirs. He didn't come. At 12:22 a.m., murmurs started. At 12:40 a.m., tension. At 1:05 a.m., anger. Men in robes looking at each other like children left without a teacher. Then the doors opened. A delivery man walked in carrying a clipboard. No hood. No fear. Just a job. Behind him, 12 boxes. Wooden. Plain. Nailed shut. Each box had a name written on it. Not McDonough's name. The names of 12 men. The 12 who had been there that day. The 12 who had laughed as a girl's back became street. They stared at the boxes like they were bombs. The delivery man set the clipboard down. Delivery man. Sign here. No one moved. A man stepped forward, hands trembling. He signed because muscle memory is stronger than fear. The delivery man left without another word. Silence took the room. One man approached his box. He ran a finger over the wood. He tried to laugh. The laugh came out wrong. He pried at the nails with a pocket knife. The metal scraped. The lid loosened. He lifted it. The smell hit first. Not rot. Not yet. Something fresh and wrong. Then he saw what was inside. He made a sound that wasn't human. His knees buckled. He fell backward, hands flailing, trying to push the vision away from his eyes. The others surged forward despite themselves. Curiosity. Horror. The need to know if it was real. More lids came off. More screams. And inside each box, one body part. A hand. A foot. A piece of jaw. Something with a ring still on it. Something with a gold cross chain tangled around it like mockery. And in each box, a note. Simple paper. Clean handwriting. Your leader returned. Assembly required. The men stared at the words like they couldn't translate them. Then the meaning landed. Their grand wizard was gone. Not just dead. Erased. Reduced. Divided. A message. A promise. The room erupted into panic. Men tore off hoods and shoved them into pockets. Men pushed past each other toward the door. Some vomited. Some prayed. Some cried. Some cursed. Fear is contagious. It moved through them like fever. By sunrise, the hall was empty. Within 48 hours, Klan men melted out of the city. They sold property. They switched jobs. They moved families. They stopped wearing rings. Stopped meeting in basements. Stopped talking about rallies. You can fight law. You can fight politics. You can fight headlines. But you can't fight the idea that someone is willing to do to you what you did to others. The police investigated, of course. Officially. A councilman missing. That mattered. Newspapers asked questions. City Hall demanded answers. Priests whispered. Wives cried into handkerchiefs. Detectives knocked on doors. They asked about mistresses. About gambling. About debts. They never looked in Harlem. Or if they did, they didn't look hard. Because Bumpy Johnson was playing cards with the police commissioner that night. That's the kind of detail that makes the story rot your stomach. At 11:30 p.m. Thursday, while McDonough was waking up in a warehouse, Bumpy had been seen at a private apartment, laughing softly, shuffling a deck, placing bets. Witnessed by men with badges. Men who like their envelopes thick. An alibi built from corruption. A missing councilman became a rumor. A scandal. Ran off with a mistress. Story that the department quietly fed to the press to keep the city from admitting something else. That a black crime boss had done what the law refused to do. That terror had met its mirror and didn't recognize itself. Rebecca stayed in bed for weeks. Then months. 8 months of slow healing. The kind that never really heals. Her back scarred in long ridges, raised and shiny. The doctor did what he could. But you can't unwrite cobblestone. She learned to sit differently. To sleep carefully. To avoid certain fabrics because they rubbed wrong. She learned that pain can become normal if you live long enough with it. Bumpy arranged private education for her. Tutors. Books. Protection. He placed men outside her building when she walked. He made sure she never had to cross into the wrong neighborhood again. But the city left marks deeper than skin. Sometimes, Rebecca woke up at night gasping, fingers clawing at the sheets like they were rope. Sometimes she flinched at the sound of hooves on stone. Sometimes she stared out the window at Harlem and looked like she was counting miles. Bumpy never asked her to forgive. He never asked her to forget. He didn't even ask her to be grateful. He just stayed close in the way men like him show love. Through systems. Through control. Through making sure the world cannot reach you again. And the Klan's presence in Harlem, the visible part at least, dropped hard. People later said it fell by almost 90% within a year. Hard to measure exactly. Hate doesn't keep ledgers. Hate adapts. But the rallies stopped. The patrols stopped. The boldness faded. Fear had been redistributed. On December 1, 1935, Rebecca turned 15. Harlem threw her a small party in a back room of a restaurant. Nothing fancy. Cake. Candles. A few neighbors. Music low. Laughter careful, like everyone was still afraid to jinx her survival. Bumpy arrived late, coat dusted with snow. He carried a small box. Rebecca looked up from the cake, and for a second she was 14 again. Excited. Hopeful. Alive. He handed her the box. She opened it slowly. Inside, a necklace. Simple chain. On it a small charm. A horse. Her fingers trembled as she touched it. Not because it hurt. Because it meant something. A reminder. A reclaiming. A way of turning terror into proof. She looked at him. Her voice came out quiet. Rebecca. Why? Bumpy leaned down so only she could hear. Bumpy. So you remember? You survived. Rebecca swallowed. Her eye glistened. She nodded once. Bumpy's hand rested on her shoulder, careful, always careful now. Bumpy. Never bow. Never. She held the charm tight until it left an imprint on her palm. And somewhere in New York, a man who once wore a gold cross under a white hood existed now only as a story whispered in bars. A cautionary tale told by men who suddenly had places to be whenever Harlem came up in conversation. Was it justice? Or was it revenge? When the law calls a lynching an accident? When the city shrugs at a child's torn back, what does protection become? What does morality look like when it's the only thing left standing between innocence and the street? If this story made you think about what happens when the system fails, hit subscribe. We're not glorifying violence. We're tracing the consequences that history books often sanitize, and the choices people make when they're forced into corners no one should ever have to see. In the comments, tell me this. If you were Bumpy, and the world let your 14-year-old sister get dragged 3 miles like a warning, would you have trusted the law? Or would you have written your own? And for Rebecca Johnson, 14 years old in 1935, who refused to bow and lived anyway. Remember her. Not as a victim. As a line the city failed to cross. Rest in power. 3:47 a.m. The street still tastes like iron.